Good day, and welcome to another Martial Forest conversation. My name is Stephen Parkus. I am a BQH practitioner and owner-operator of Mindset Enterprise. I am here with my good friend Logan Wooldridge. Logan is the owner of the martialforest.com and head writer of the site and its blog, including a range of categories such as nutrition, training the body, training the mind, and more. So, today, Logan, we're talking about mobility and recovery. Could you just give us a quick overview of what exactly do you mean when we say mobility and recovery?
I'd be happy to. So, mobility is the active range of flexibility. So, we're talking about the range with which you move your body intentionally without assistance and still be able to control it. So, you're not injuring yourself. So, you're not putting yourself in compromised positions that could potentially lead to injury by, you know, repetitively being in such a position, as doesn't always lead immediately to an injury. And then recovery kind of stems a little bit from that. And that, recovery is about anything that helps you recover, helps you heal up after an exertion or an injury. Particularly in today's case, we're going to be talking more about recovery in regards to recuperating after exertion. We want to try and recover enough before we're actually injured so that we don't have to go through that extra long recovery period. But recovery can be either one of those two. It's just so clear.
Absolutely. From your perspective, why do you think it is that so many overlook mobility and recovery?
Well, honestly, I think they both can kind of come back to this to very similar reason, really, and that they're not particularly noticeable results you're aiming with them, right? Like mobility, you might be able to move in a little wider range of motion, but it's nothing like being able to lift another 100 pounds. You know what I mean?
Right.
An extra inch, big freaking whoop in comparison. A lot of people would feel. I've been one of those at points. And recovery is even harder to notice, especially when we're talking about it the way we are here, which is as preventative to injury. You're not injured yet. What am I recovering from? My body would regenerate anyways, right? Uh, well, yeah, but how well do you want to go through life? How sore do you want to go through life? All these things.
Absolutely. And so would you say that the lack of taking recovery time is kind of a cumulative effect, like it builds up over time and then eventually leads to injury?
It definitely can. It definitely. I want to be clear though. I do think more of today's population has the issue of not exerting themselves enough in the physical realm specifically.
Hmm.
And interestingly, it also doesn't give you enough mental, emotional recovery time, right? And I don't just mean that in the like mental health type of way. Even when we're talking about performance and stuff, there's a certain level of clarity of thought you have to have, of perception, of being able to judge when you're in alignment and when you're not. All of these things. And as you move up in level, as I hope would be guessed, it becomes more and more difficult to observe just how aligned, just how clearly you can see yourself going through a movement and not getting injured. All of this becomes more and more precise and difficult as you reach deeper or further into any realm.
And so, are there any stories that really highlight the consequence of neglecting this side of training?
I mean, there's a whole slew of them. You can probably look them up, at least some of them. Myself, I've had two for me, big injuries. Nothing I've ever needed surgery for, at least in the area of training. But I have nearly given myself a hernia once, the first time I tried to deadlift with a barbell. because I didn't have any real guidance, didn't really know what I was doing. I had been deadlifting with dumbbells, but it's still a little bit of a different technique, and I weighted it up a little too much.
Mm.
Pop. That messed me up for a little while. That was when I was a bit younger, and then a couple of years ago, I almost popped my rotator cuff. I strained it for sure. Had to eventually have it slinged for a few days. I slung it up myself just to mobilize it so it could just rest up and was stiff afterwards. It's nasty. But again, thankfully nothing I've had to have surgery for. But both times, big audible pops and pain, and week plus, 2 weeks plus, in fact, for both. Month arounds, I believe. For I couldn't train. I couldn't really. It was difficult to work. Still had to work. Got to make money, but it was difficult. I was in pain, all because of a training mishap. And both were from overexertion, not enough rest. I tend to push myself really hard, particularly in the gym, and especially when I was younger. I've gotten a little better as I'm getting older, continue to get better at, taking it easy when I need to. But yeah, it can be a real problem, especially if you're just naturally an active person. I think there's plenty of people, when you're more inclined towards computer work and stuff like that, you're more inclined to take a more than enough rest, and that's totally opposite problem. So don't take this as a one size fits all. But if you're that type, be aware.
Absolutely. Okay. And so one of the things that we always try to bring it around to here at the Marshall Forest is weaving nature into our conversations here. And so with the movement and recovery mindset, how can we compare that to natural rhythms? How does nature show us the balance between effort and rest?
I think you can see it in many facets of nature. The wind doesn't blow constantly.
Mhm.
Trees require periods of growth, vegetation, and then periods of rest and recovery. Um, especially in this part of the world where we are, in the Northeast, we get the snowy winters and stuff, right? Plants are shutting right down during that time. Some of them even die off and then just grow back the next spring. Bigger, more fruitful. Animals, some hibernate through the winter too, plenty of predators that go and hunt only do it in bursts of energy and then rest most of the day. Um, it, you know,
Mhm.
but I know that you've also had your own times in the woods and such. You grow things, like myself. We're both gardeners. I'd be interested to hear your perspective.
No, you nailed it. Especially like you said, around here with the drastic change in seasons, this year especially, that kind of really came through for me. That reflection on nature is resting. Nature is letting things process and, getting ready to it's storing energy and getting ready to move back out into the spring. And so, yeah, I've really been able to compare that to some of my own natural cycles. I tend to have those periods where I can't just keep taking in new things. I need to solidify the old things first. So, yeah, absolutely. And then, the gardening cycle as well. Everything has to be planted at a certain time. The seed has to be nurtured and grown at a different location sometimes and then planted. And, there's all those things that really mirror our own journey and growth as humans, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, see that. Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so now getting back to the practical side a little bit, I imagine there's someone or some people out there who are nodding along, thinking, all right, I get it. I should be focusing on mobility and recovery. But if that's not part of my practice, where do I even start?
Hmm. And the good news is you can start small, right? And the even better news is if you're starting and you're starting with this stuff, right? This mobility recovery stuff, it can be started. It's not like lifting weights. You don't need to start there. You don't need to start that. You can start with a daily stretching routine. You can start with a daily meditation practice to help decompress at the end of the day. You know, all of these are recovery practices or mobility practices. If you want to go more active in the mobility realm, you can do things like stretching. You can do yoga. You can go and play some sports in for like a controlled amount of time, maybe daily or every other day. Just enough so you're getting a little score that shows you, you're working those new areas, you're moving those new muscles. Make sure you're doing it within safe confines. Meaning time range and everything, not just location and don't push it hard if you just get going. But all of these can help, especially in the beginning. It doesn't take a lot to begin to work those into greater ranges, into greater capacity.
Absolutely.
Is there any particular methodology that would come to your mind as an interest for mobility and or recovery?
Yeah. In the past, I've had periods where I was stretching every day. And I also try to meditate every day, breathing exercises, that sort of thing. Especially just trying to release that tension and like tightened up state that I tend to hold a lot of the times. And that was kind of my question. I'm curious, for you personally, how does your recovery, what does your recovery look like?
Well, at the end of every training period or training day, I stretch. I go for a little cardio. Jog, walk, with whatever, and I stretch. So that's kind of like direct recovery just from the extreme exertion I push myself through every day. But then I also make sure to do kind of a daily recovery, if you will, which I refer to as my wind down routine. Talked a little about that before, and I stretch, breath work, meditation. I particularly do things to set myself up for the next morning. While that's not exactly recovery, it is in some cases because it relieves mental stress for me. I wake up knowing that the first few things are set and ready to go for me. I don't have to wake up, oh shit, I gotta get the coffee going, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, or else I'm not gonna have any. No, it's there, it's ready to go. The main thing is like breakfast, but that is its own kind of, I guess, recovery thing too, because I'm getting the proper fuel in my system. I eat eggs every morning, so I healthy fuel in me as I get the day going. Healthy eating is recovery.
Yeah, those are perfect points. We got to feed our bodies what it needs to be able to recover and build itself back up, and also the mental side of things too. Even myself, I guess I had kind of a pre-programmed notion. Recovery is a physical act. You just don't do as much, but there's a whole mental side to that. What are we consuming? How are we switching between tasks during the day? All of these things that either add to or relieve some of the pressure that's going on mentally. And I would say in today's day and age, today's society, especially here in the U.S., we are all overwhelmed and dysregulated mentally, emotionally. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up.
Absolutely,
Sure.
and a lot of it being, I think, the pace of life has gotten so fast. So knowing techniques and employing techniques specifically to help you switch between things, taking that time, even if those things are just from day to day, winding down at night, getting back into the day in the morning instead of slamming yourself up into bed, slamming yourself up into the day.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. That's been one of the most helpful things that I've taken on in the past 6 months, I would say, is trying to put more routine into my mornings and nights. That's always been a tough point for me, but it is so beneficial, not just shutting everything down and going to try to going to try to lay down and go to sleep. Um,
Yeah, why can't I sleep? Dude, you shut your TV off 2 minutes ago.
right,
What do you
exactly.
think is going to happen?
Yep. Wonder why I toss and turn or have crazy dreams or
Yeah.
wake up feeling crazy.
Yep. I 99% of my days are run this way. Occasionally, such as we're recording this last night for me, I get caught up in something and I go to turn it off, and inevitably, even after all this time of handling it right, I lay awake in bed for more than an hour, tossing and turning because I can't get to sleep because I'm wired. I turned my shit off. I ran my day late, and now I had to turn it off and get to bed as soon as possible. But because I did that and didn't take the time, I've gotten up before when I realized this 30, 45 minutes into laying down. You're like, why can't I sleep? I didn't freaking do my routine. Now I got to turn the light back on, stretch and this and that, and I'll do it. And boom, I'm out. Like that, right? I'm like, I didn't take the damn time in the first place, just,
Oh yeah.
But you're already so worked up. You're like, oh my God, I got to get to bed because I got to get up. And then I got to. Like, yeah, you'd be better to take the time, though. Even though you're already late, be later. So you'll actually be earlier by being later.
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of going back to something you said before, I know we may have mentioned this in other conversations, but you mentioned stretching after your workout. And I know you said before that it's kind of just to wind down the muscles rather than gear them up. Could you kind of just talk a little bit about that?
I mean, don't get me wrong. You want to stretch before too, but it's different. When you're actively stretching to wake the muscle up, you're doing it dynamically. You're moving. You might hold a stretch for a couple seconds or something. You could do like up to 5 minutes, I'd say, of static stretching, but I wouldn't recommend too long. Because that wakes the muscle up. It activates the muscle. You need to actually use them and work them out to get them ready to work. I know today we can turn cars on and just go, but there was most of history with vehicles even where you had to give them a little time to warm up. And then you have like static stretching. You do that for a prolonged period of time where you're holding the muscle in an elongated position so that it is literally stretching the fibers out and kind of showing them by holding them there. Look, you can relax, like get hurt or anything. You can relax. And it does. It just slowly releases its own tension by being shown it's safe to do so. And you do that by holding it in that elongated position or the relaxed position for 30 plus seconds, 20 plus seconds. And you can go up and up and it'll have a more relaxing effect to the point that it can get dangerous that you've relaxed it too much. You'd stretch too much, so you want to be careful. Flexible joints, it's a thing, but most of us are tight. Stretching can be a really good thing to help wind down after you've activated your muscles through pre-stretching, warm-ups, all that, gone down the exercise, whatever that is, whether that be with weights, body, whatever, and then you got to bring them back to be at a regular position, to be ready to sit again instead of just like when we were talking about sleep. You don't want to take your muscles from I've got to lift 200 pounds to do nothing. Like that messed them up. Like now they're going to spasm. They're going to do all these things because what am I doing? I was just, put it in more of a natural, if you will, ancestral framework. You just basically told your muscles a tiger or a lion is trying to eat you and then try to sit still. Your body does not want you to sit still. It thinks a predator is coming to kill you. It is telling your body literally is screaming to your mind and your mind back to your body like, relax. No, something's trying to kill me. Relax. No, something's trying to kill me. That'll mess you up, man. Your muscles don't know how to react to that.
Yeah.
They can tie themselves up. They can get all messed up. And vice versa. You don't want to go from sitting eating a big feast with the tribe to freaking pack of lions incurring into the camp and trying to eat everybody. Because you might have a heart attack. You might have some torn muscles. You might they're not meant to go that fast, believe it or not. Especially when you haven't done that in your life. No, that can really sidetrack all your plans. But small. Sure, you can find some very basic routines. We'll hopefully have some up soon that are just like some quick 5-minute, routine. You can probably find some on YouTube or something. Nothing that's like for anything specific, just in general. If you find a full body one, I'd really recommend that. Just to not only for the benefit of stretching, but with something like a full body stretching routine, quick one. You'll also get a familiarity with your body. Is there any areas that are particularly tense? That can not only tell you where you should be stretching more, but also might inform you a little of how your lifestyle is affecting you. Get you start be aware of these things. That's always really always the underlying, becoming aware of these things, because so much of our behavior is just based on what we're aware of. So that would be my recommendation, particularly with stretching, because stretching gaps both mobility and recovery. So it's a great foundation. No, I think that's it, man. Give it some thought. Hopefully give it a try, even if just one night, see how it feels. Again, I would encourage, if you're just doing this to start out, start small, start short, and if you can, start doing it before bed. You can really notice the benefits there.